All right, what's good, y'all? CBH of CD Southern. As you can see, I got my glasses on today because I cannot read without my glasses. And today, we're going to be talking about women's volleyball. So, volleyball is the fastest growing sport in America for women, with about 470,000 high school girls playing the sport. That's more than the amount of high school girls that play basketball, which is 355,000. All right. So women's college volleyball has seen an increase in viewership for their tourney of about 13% year over year, with about 1.7 million people watching the finals this past December. Which is pretty impressive because it took place on an NFL Sunday. So 1.7 million, to give you an example, would be probably your average regular season baseball game, like a Sunday night regular season baseball game, a marquee matchup would be about 1.7 million. Women's college basketball generally averages for their title game around 9 to 10 million in a non-Caitlin Clark year. But 1.7 million on an NFL Sunday, that's very impressive. Now, you may or may not have heard about this, but 92,000 people filled Nebraska's football stadium in 2023, which is incredible. They completely sold out the stadium for a Nebraska volleyball match. I think it was two different teams. I believe it was Nebraska. It may have been Creighton. I don't remember the other team, but it was two different matches that took place. Nebraska was in one of them. But to have 92,000 people show up for a volleyball match, that's just absolutely incredible. So anyway, I'm CBH of CD Southern, and to my left, you can see a football game going on. That's my app, Southern Gridiron Darts. It's a way to play darts or replicate a game of football while throwing darts. And you can get it down in the script. There's a link there where you can download for your phone, tablet, iPad, iPhone, whatever have you. And you can try out yourself if you enjoy playing darts or if you enjoy the game of football. All right, let's get back on topic. I first got into volleyball in 2024 during the Olympics in France. When I was just clicking around, just needed a sport to watch, and volleyball was on. I watched both the men's and the women's game, and the crowds there, because volleyball is pretty big in Europe, and the crowds there, especially at the women's game, was just kind of enthralling. I learned during COVID time that crowds play a huge role when it comes to drawing you in and wanting to watch a sport on TV. Like, they add so much to the environment. Obviously, in person, they add to the environment. But even on TV, when you see a large crowd into a sport, it makes you want to get into a sport. If you see a large empty stadium for a sport, you're not going to be into that game as much, because you're like, well, if they don't even care about it at the game, then why should I care about it? You know what I'm saying? But so that kind of hooked me and brought me in. Italy apparently is one of the big countries when it comes to volleyball, when it comes to popularity. Women's volleyball can rival women's soccer in Italy and things like that. So once the Olympics ended in France, I was kind of hooked. I was like, okay, where can I catch some other volleyball matches and things like that? So that's when I actually ended up checking out college volleyball, which happened to start a couple of weeks after the Olympics ended. So it's like, okay, cool, let's get into this. And college volleyball had already started picking up steam when it comes to being shown on television. So I was able to watch like Big Ten matches. And when I watched Big Ten matches, it was incredible. Like, those crowds are absolutely crazy. I already spoke about Nebraska, but really you can go up and down. Penn State has some really good crowds. Wisconsin has some great crowds. And Minnesota represented. I know there's a little rivalry between Wisconsin, Minnesota, and other sports and things like that. But when I really started looking into it, Texas down at SEC, big crowds. When I started really looking into it, I was just like, oh man, this is women's volleyball is okay. This is kind of a big deal, especially up north and out towards Texas and things like that. And as you may or may not know, Texas A&M just won the NCAA tournament this previous year, and man, you didn't see it. That Texas A&M Nebraska match, you got. If you find somebody, I personally have it still recorded on my YouTube TV account. If you find somebody who has that match, go back. I know I've only been watching women's volleyball for like 2 seconds, but that was one of the best spectacles I've seen when it comes to women's volleyball. All right. Besides the crowds in women's volleyball, what also drew me in is I have a whole bunch of friends whose daughters play women's volleyball, and they were telling me about it before I even got into it. They was like, hey man, you might want to check this game out. You want to check this sport out because it's really intense, it's really fun, it's high action. Literally there's a point after every score or after every serve. Yeah, point after every score. Anyway, there's a point after every serve, and you really can get into it. And I was just like, all right, cool. Let me check it out. Let me see what's going on. Well, I didn't check it out then. I checked it out at the Olympics, but their voices in my head were just like, okay, I can kind of see why they're into this and all that good stuff. So for the record, I enjoy watching the women's game more so than the men's game. Um, Mainly because, and I talked to a buddy of mine who actually plays volleyball, and he told me why most people do like the women's version more so than the men's version. And it's because the men's version is more so based off of power and speed and things like that. So they have quick points. While the women's game, there's a bit more strategy and tactics involved, a lot more movement on the court when it comes to the women's game. And it's more defensive based. And obviously, there's a lot of strategy and offense, but because you have a lot more defense when it comes to the women's game, when it comes to digs and things like that, it creates longer rallies. It's harder to get points in the women's game. Or the men's game, that power and then having power serves leads to shorter points. It kind of reminds me of tennis. And I actually like watching women's tennis more so than I enjoy watching men's tennis. And that's mainly because in women's tennis, they have longer rallies, so you can see what they're trying to do. You can see how they're trying to manipulate and move their opponent during the rallies, and you see better shots. While the men's game is your heavy serve, you're trying to put your opponent off balance right off the serve. So that's why I appreciate long rallies, because you can really see the movement and strategy behind the game when you see long rallies. All right. And speaking of serves, as I've now know a little bit more about volleyball than I did like back when I was watching during Olympics, just from listening to the announcers kind of explain the game while we're watching. So let's go over some of the strategies and some of the intrigue that has drawn me into the game of volleyball. The first thing is, like, speak about the service. Now, obviously, men have the more power serves and stuff like that, but it doesn't mean women can't, really put some speed behind their serves and things like that. And I love watching serves, especially when you're watching it like from inline to inline, because you can really start seeing the movement that they're able to put on the serve and how they're trying to put pressure on the defense by putting them out of system. And when you put an offense out, so obviously when you're serving to the other team, they're receiving a serve defensively, but then they transition into their offense after receiving that serve. So if you put forth a really good serve, not only could you potentially get an ace off of the serve, but you could put your opponent out of system for their offense, which being out of system means they only essentially have one option. And if your opponent only has one option, attacking option, then it's easier to play defense against your opponent because you already know exactly where they're going. An in-system play is usually when your opponent has three different options. So it's hard for the defense to set up, the blockers at the net to set up, because they don't know where the ball's going. So there's an advantage to serving very well. And I really like watching serves because they remind me of pitchers. Now, pitchers paint the corner and they're trying to, they throw off-speed pitches, they throw power pitches, they throw pitches with movements. Service is the exact same way. You can do a power serve. You can do a serve that just dives right after it crosses the net. You can do a short serve. You can do a deep serve. You can do all these different kind of serves where you can position and move the ball where you want to try to keep the defense off balance the entire time. And I love that because it does remind me of an ace pitcher who's really just crafting and painting the corners and things like that. Now, moving from servers and going on to setters. So setters in volleyball, they're like the quarterbacks or point guards or offense coordinators of the team, of the offense, obviously. They're the ones who kind of, they set up the attackers when they're running routes and trying to keep the defense off balance. And the way they keep the defense off balance is they try to hide where they're going to go with the ball, who they're setting and things like that. I always thought, like, before I knew more about volleyball, I always thought setting was just like you're putting up a nice, accurate, set for your hitter to go get. But really, you're actually trying to fool the defense, who's trying to guess and predict where you're going with your set. Because as long as they can set up two if they're lucky, 3 blockers, it's going to be difficult for the attacker to find space behind the net or past the blockers to be able to get a point or get a kill and things like that. So the setter has to be very manipulative, and they have to be very deceitful with who they're getting ready to set up, or they can be quick with their set, like set somebody, do a short set real quick to maybe a middle, so they can get a hit in before the blockers can close on them and things like that. And I never really knew that about the game. They really are like quarterbacks, and they're just trying to find holes in the defense. So as the setter is going up, they're actually kind of looking out the side of their eye to see what the defense is trying to do, where people are set up, and even the setter can go up and do a quick dump where they can score on too. But and I love that about it. It just kind of drew me in. I'm like, oh, okay, they're like quarterbacks, they're like point guards. All right, I'm down with this. And as I already mentioned, the attackers, like outside hitters and things like that, and attacks from the back row, they kind of remind me of 2 things. The first thing, they remind me of hitters. They remind me of batters in baseball, insofar as you have so many different shots. And you're trying to find holes in the defense when you're going into these shots. You can go down the line as a hitter. You can go cross court as a hitter. You can slice the ball when you kind of hit it and it goes down across the net and goes in. You can do quick tips. They're like bunts for a batter. So you just lay it down real quick, catch the defense off guard, and you just get a quick point like that, or a quick hit, as it were, in baseball. And then you have roll shots, which you hit it like this, so it rolls and has so much momentum that it dies once it crosses the net. It also reminds me, like I said, it reminds me of batters, really good batters, like an Ichiro, or you can have power hitters. That's what I also forgot to mention. You have like Olivia Babcock. She plays for Pitt, the Pitt Panthers. Can go up and just rip it real hard, real clean, and just put too much power behind the ball that it's impossible for the defense to react to it. So those are like power sluggers. Or you have an Ichiro or a Tony Gwynn in baseball, just finding holes in the defense, just great hitters. That's what hitters remind me of in volleyball. But they also remind me of coming off the Masters. Masters ended just yesterday. Big shout out to Rory McIlroy, getting back-to-back green jackets. Beautiful. Love that. But they also remind me of golfers, where you're coming off the tee. You can have a power drive coming off the tee with your driver. That reminds me of a power hitter. You can slice the ball. You can pull the ball with your clubs. You can decide what kind of, if you want to do a wedge shot, or you're chipping in from a sand trap and putts. You're going, like, you have all these kind of different shots you can do with your different clubs as a golfer. And that's what it reminds me of when you're a hitter in volleyball. You have all these different kind of shots that you can do, that you're basing off the defense, where they're at, and trying to catch them off guard, and just trying to find a hole in the defense. And I love that about the attacking element, the offensive element when it comes to volleyball. Let's talk about the reaction time, especially of the liberos. The liberos are kind of like, I guess you could say, they're like the linebackers or the shortstops in volleyball. Insofar as they're the ones who are they're usually in the back row, and they're the ones who usually dig the ball if the ball gets past the front blockers on defense. So they're the ones coordinating the defense, and they're the ones to cover space if the shots or the hits get past the front blockers and things like that. So as the setter is the quarterback of the defense, the liberos are essentially the linebackers, or you can even say they're the DBs, because they just have to cover so much space. Just linebackers have to cover space too. And they have the reaction times of like shortstops or third baseman in baseball at the hot corner. And it's really cool watching them, because not only do you have to get to the ball, but you have to keep it elevated, and you have to get it off the floor and make sure that your teammates have a good chance to set up a good hit. Because remember, you only get 3 hits to be able to get the ball back across. So as a libero, you're representing the first hit, even if it comes off a tip block. Tip block doesn't count as a hit. You're representing the first hit, and the second hit is your setter. So what you're trying to do is get a good pass to your setter while you're playing defense. So you're transitioning from defense to offense based off of your digs. And that's just kind of incredible. It's just like flipping a double play. So you're going, getting the ball, you're flipping it over to your teammates so they can toss it over to first base to get the double play. It's really incredible, but they do it all in one motion. It's a beautiful thing. And I love watching good libero play. Now that I understand the game more, I love watching good libero play, and I love watching good set play. And then lastly, as I mentioned the blockers before, blockers are also like linebackers because a good blocker has to be able to read what the quarterback is doing, like a linebacker has to be able to read what the quarterback is doing, or a deep safety, a free safety has to read what the quarterback is doing. And your setters are your quarterbacks. So if you're on the defensive side, you're trying to read what that setter's doing, like who are they going to pass the ball to and things like that. So you can set up your block, especially if you're the middle blocker, because the middle blocker has to help over on the left side. They got to help out on the right side, and they got to be responsible for the middle, just in case their opposite goes in for attack or the setter goes for attack on two. And so it's really cool watching the blockers because they're reading the game just the same as the setter and the liberos are reading the game, where they're playing this game of chess, like trying to figure out, okay, who are you trying to set, who are you trying to go to, and things like that. Another thing I love about volleyball is the emotional outburst that occurs after a big kill or a huge roof block where the ball just goes straight down from a block. And it's like seeing a big hit in football and things like that. It's just that impact. It's just a certain rush. It really is fun to watch that. And long rallies in volleyball remind me of long at bats in baseball. So like at bats that go 5+ pitches, where one batter is going up against the pitcher for 5+ pitches. That's fun to watch because you can see that struggle. And the longer that at bat goes, the batter's trying to figure out, okay, how are you trying to put me out now? And then the pitcher's trying to figure out, how am I going to get this batter out? What pitch can I throw? Where can I throw? What are they anticipating? So it becomes a mental chess game where the batter's trying to anticipate what the pitcher's trying to do, and the pitcher's trying to intimidate how they can get the batter out. It's the same thing with volleyball when it comes to a long rally. The drama builds, the tensions builds, because you don't know how are you going to get the ball down on the other team. And the longer it goes, you're trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to keep the ball up when it comes to transition offense, where you're playing defense and switching to offense real quick and keeping your options open, staying in system during the long rally so you can have as many options to attack your opponent as possible. And the longer it goes, the tension builds and things like that. And it's just like, it's a rush when you can go I'll say like 10, 15+ hits back and forth across rally points, back and forth across the net. It's just really fun to watch. But what's another funny thing is, after a long rally, is right after that rally, the next server comes up and does a service ace. So you spent all that time, you spent 15, 20 seconds or whatever, however long it was, 30 seconds, trying to get a single point, and then you give it right back to your opponent. So I've seen that a lot. It's kind of funny because you have an emotional explosion from winning the rally, and then the very next thing you know, you just gave that point right back to him with a service error. Now, after watching my first season of college volleyball in 2024, I was lucky because I live here in Atlanta. And Atlanta happens to have 2 pro volleyball teams because there's 2 different leagues. There's MLV, Major League Volleyball, and then you also have League One Volleyball, which is also known as Love. And so those seasons start up in January, right after the college volleyball season ends. So that was like perfect for me because I was just like, okay, I'm starting to kind of crave a little volleyball here. I want to see some. So I was able to go to Atlanta Vibe match down at GSU. They had one at GSU Convocation Center, and I was able to go check that out, and it was really enjoyable to watch in person. And MLV is more so like, I would say, a traditional sports league insofar as you have franchisees, you kind of buy into the league, meaning you purchase a club in a city to introduce to a city, to a new market, and you have a fee in which you have to pay to be able to get into the league and things like that. That's how most American leagues work. You have expansion fees. While League One volleyball is actually, it reminds me more of European academies and European soccer, football, obviously, as they call it. But you have the academy system where League One volleyball, they have, let's see here, what did I write down here? You have 22,000 players, not in the league, but youth players, because it has a youth academy system, youth club system from 12 to 18 years old, where you have 22,000 players across the country that feed up into, right now they have 6 teams. Next year they're going to have 9 teams. But feed up into these 6 teams. And I think last year about 600 of those club teams fed into college teams, which is a high amount. So you're building them up from the grassroots and you're growing them into the professional game and developing them over time, which I absolutely love. There's clubs across 28 states and there's 77 clubs. So it's really cool because there's two different models. You have the MLB model, which is old school, our traditional American model, and then you have the European model in Love or League One volleyball. And speaking of growing the women's game in America, you start following players as they play in college, and they build their names, they build their brand because you're usually linked to a particular college. You know the brand names when it comes to the colleges. You know your Nebraskas, you know your Penn States, you know your UCLA's, you know your Texas A&M's, you know your Georgias, you know your Florida. You know the colleges themselves are brand names. So when you see big time like women's volleyball players playing those particular colleges, you can get into it just because you know the brand of the particular colleges. But then you start to build a connection to the individual players, and then you follow those players up into the pro league. I'll give you an example. This is what happened with the NBA whenever the NBA had Magic Johnson and they had Larry Bird. So Magic Johnson, like at the time during the early 80s, late 70s, the NBA wasn't as popular as it is today. It was actually struggling. Obviously, you had the NBA Finals on like tape delay and things like that. So Larry Bird and Magic Johnson were able to build a rivalry in college at Indiana State and Michigan State. And they just took that rivalry from college and moved it into the pro game. And their rivalry, especially when they ended up with the Celtics and the Lakers, historically two of the most successful teams in the league. And when they ended up in those two markets, and their rivalry just built from there, and their rivalry actually helped increase the popularity of the NBA until Michael Jordan took it to a whole nother level. But they kind of brought the NBA, back from the abyss. Same thing happened with the NFL back in the 1920s, because we look at the NFL as a behemoth now, but back in the 1920s, it wasn't like that. And they actually used the NFL intentionally used college football stars and tried to draw them into the professional game, because back then, after you finished college, you went into a regular working class job, whatever job may have you. But the NFL gave them a chance to continue playing. And remember, the NFL wasn't making money like it does today. So it took some serious convincing to get some of these players to play in the NFL, because you don't know what kind of paycheck you're going to get. But because the NFL was banking on the brand of these college stars and athletes, they're banking on their brand to help elevate the brand of the NFL itself. This has happened with the WNBA recently when it comes to Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. Angel Reese playing at LSU, Caitlin Clark at Iowa, and they built a little rivalry. And obviously, Caitlin Clark has brought the numbers when it comes to attention to women's basketball, college basketball first. Women's college basketball did 18 million. The title game had 18 million when it was South Carolina against Iowa a couple of years ago. You can see building your brand at the college level can help build the brand at the professional level. And the WNBA has certainly seen a bump in attention, attendance numbers, and they just thankfully just finished a new deal. They didn't have to do a strike or a lockout. So they're going to be coming with a lot of momentum. And that all started at the college level with players like, Angel Reese and players like Caitlin Clark. Yeah. So having said that, let me give a shout out and read off a few players' names that you may want to watch. Some of them have already moved on to the pro level, but some of them are still in college here. You got a Harper Murray, you have a Lexi Rodriguez. I think she's playing in League One volleyball now for Nebraska, which she played for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. So she just went right in and stayed in the market. You have an Andy Jackson. She plays at Nebraska. As you can tell, I have a whole bunch of Nebraska players here. Olivia Babcock, I already mentioned her from Pitt. Ava Martin, she actually plays in Atlanta now. She plays for the Atlanta Vibe. So Ava Martin, she played for, I believe, Creighton. So she came from that Nebraska area, that Nebraska market. Ava Hudson plays for Kentucky. She played for Kentucky. Now she plays for Atlanta, except in League One volleyball. So you have Ava Martin over with the Vibe, and then you have Eva Hudson over with League One Volleyball for Atlanta. So you have two different teams in Atlanta here because apparently we have a big contingent of girls who play volleyball in this state. Brooklyn DeLay, she plays from Kentucky. She was a teammate of Ava Hudson. Madison Skinner, who she plays for now. I think she plays for Austin now, but I think she did play for Texas, the Longhorns, a couple years ago. Charlie Furbringer, she currently plays for Wisconsin. Probably my favorite setter to watch. She is incredible to watch how she runs an offense and things like that. And love watching me some Charlie Furbringer, Kennedy Martin out in Penn State, and Tori Stafford, who plays down in Texas. Absolutely love Tori Stafford's game. Like I said before, when it comes to Atlanta has two different pro teams because there's two different leagues, professional leagues. And in my opinion, I think if you really want to grow the game, you really want to have these two leagues merge. It's going to be difficult, and I'll get into the reason why that is in a second. But let me give you the reason why you want to merge. Because, like I just said, you have Ava Martin and Eva Hudson. They're both in the Atlanta market, but they're playing in two completely different leagues. So they'll never face off. They'll never meet each other and things like that. When Harper Murray and Olivia Babcock graduate, they could end up in two different leagues. One could end up in MLV, one could end up in League One Volleyball, and they'll never match up or meet each other. So just like I just mentioned, how Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, how they could translate and bring their rivalry into the program. If you have a rivalry that builds at the college game, and then two of the stars of that rivalry go into two different leagues, so they'll never meet again, it's hard to develop your league that are leagues that way when you're splitting the talent. When the talent pool is split like that. Let's talk about other leagues in which this has happened. The NFL and AFL back in the 1960s, going into the early 70s, they were splitting the talent pool. Like you have one player will go to the or some stars will go to the AFL, some stars will go to the NFL. NFL was seen as the higher league, the better league. But you had two different avenues in which you could play professionally, but you're kind of cannibalizing one another when it comes to talent. That's where the Super Bowl came from. The Super Bowl came from the first three Super Bowls were literally the champion. That's why it's called the NFC Championship and the AFC Championship. So the Super Bowl came from the champion of the NFL would compete with the champion of the AFL, and they came together to meet at the end, and that was the Super Bowl. The first three Super Bowls were like that. And then the leagues officially merged going into that fourth season. Same thing with the NBA and ABA during the 1970s. And the NBA actually borrowed from the ABA when it comes to the three-point line came from the ABA. I believe the slam dunk contest during the All-Star game came from the ABA, but the NBA essentially absorbed the ABA. And a lot of the teams today, I think the Spurs originally played in the ABA. There are a couple teams that still exist that originally played in the ABA because it's hard when you're competing and you're taking talent away from one another. Another example is Major League Baseball. People don't realize up until pretty much the beginning of the century, the National League and American League, besides the World Series, didn't face off. Teams from the National League would not face teams from the American League. And mainly because they were actually, in essence, two different leagues. The National League is known as the senior circuit because it was the original league. The National League is actually the original baseball league in America. And the American League came onto the scene later on. It was a rival league. And eventually they started playing the World Series. And that's why it's called the World Series, because it was literally two different leagues and their champions came together to play each other in an extended series. So that's actually how that came to be. Now you have interleague plays, so now they're really combined. And financially they're combined before that, but they're really combined now where it's just the same league. And now they're talking about doing the East Coast or West Coast and getting rid of the National League, American League. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I'm a purist when it comes to baseball, but so maybe you could do that in League One volleyball and Major League volleyball. And one of the reasons why it's going to be difficult for them to merge, like I mentioned before, the main reason is because they use two different business models. Now, the MLV, Major League Volleyball, and the Pro Federation Volleyball, that was a different league that existed last year. MLV and Pro Fed, they merged with one another and took the name of MLB. The Atlanta Vibe, as I mentioned before, they were actually part of the Pro Fed League. So it was really three different leagues there. And two of them merged. And I think that was a good thing, but they used the same business model. League One Volleyball and Major League Volleyball, they use two different business models, as I mentioned. League One is more European style, grassroots, so MLV is more franchise. But if they could do anything, maybe they could do a situation like the early NFL, AFL days, or do a situation like Major League Baseball had with the National League and American League, where the champion of MLV meet up with the champion of League One volleyball at the end of the season, at the end of both their seasons, because their seasons run at the same time. And so at the end of each one of their playoffs, the winner of each one, they meet in a final series and to determine the overall champion. And maybe that will eventually lead into them merging into as one group. But to be honest with you, even if they don't do that, if volleyball keeps playing their cards right and keep building the momentum here, it's going to be, I feel like it's going to be a significant sport in America. The college volleyball is already growing. And you can see why, man, some of the attendance down at the Final Four when it came to volleyball for this past year and things like that was insane. The crowds were insane. The Kentucky fans were just rabid. Texas A&M fans were just rabid during the championship and things like that. And it's incredible to watch. This is a very fun sport. If you never watched it before, I personally would start with a college game, especially Big Ten volleyball. Because their crowds are incredible. And like I said, with good crowds, it makes the sport that much more infectious. And then maybe if you have a professional team in your city or whatnot, go check them out. They're both MLV and League One Volleyball are expanding. I think MLV is getting like 4 more teams next year. League One Volleyball is getting, I think, 3 more teams. They're expanding to 3 more markets. So you got to check that out. But let me leave you with this before finishing up. So another thing I actually loved about League One Volleyball is, or not League One volleyball in general, is the athleticism required. And I've told you about that before earlier in the video. But here, let me just like really hit home on the point, because so many players are daughters of former or current professional athletes in other sports. So here, I got a list right here. So let me read you off some of these players. Alexis Ewing, she's the daughter of Patrick Ewing, the famous Knicks player. Capri Garnett, Kevin Garnett's son, or daughter, I should say, Kevin Garnett's daughter, a Hall of Fame basketball player. Sydney Duncan, the daughter of Tim Duncan, another Hall of Fame basketball player. Kari Spears, daughter of Marcus Spears, an former Cowboys player in the NFL. Asia O'Neal, Jermaine O'Neal's daughter. He's played for the NBA. Riley McGinnis, Willie McGinnis. I think he's in the Hall of Fame, in the NFL Hall of Fame. I'm not sure. He played for the Patriots, but Willie McGinnis's daughter. Jackie Taylor, Sean Taylor's daughter. Sean Taylor played for the Packers. Caroline and Ava Juraviscus, excuse me if I mispronounced the name. They're Joe Juraviscus. They're the daughters of Joe Juraviscus, who played for the Eagles. Nyla Bibby, Mike Bibby, he played here in Atlanta. He played in Arizona. I think he played for the Suns, but I know he played as a Wildcat in college basketball, NBA. Lacey McGrady, Tracy McGrady's daughter, incredible. Lexi Johnson, Randy Johnson, the big unit's daughter from baseball. Riley Curry, Steph Curry, everybody knows Chef Curry. Steph Curry's daughter. Zuri James, LeBron James's daughter. It's insane, and you could see the genetics and the athletics when you come from some good genetic stock. You can excel in this sport because it requires so much athleticism, not just height, but quick reaction time, being able to read the game and things like that. So that's not even the whole list. There's a lot more volleyball players that come from professional athletes. Those are just some of the ones I figure you probably know the names of. But anyway, that's it for this video. If you want to check out this game, like this game of Southern Ground Darts, this is actually me playing against the computer in a different video that is linked in the bottom below. Go check that out. Go download the game. Support me that way and things like that. Maybe get some merch from my website also in the link in the script and things like that. But that's going to do it for this video. All right. See you on the next one. Stay dirty.